مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. أنا مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. التقى جو بايدن ودونالد ترامب كما لو أنهما اثنان من المحاربين القدماء تعرضا للضرب المبرح خلال سنوات من القتال. التقيا في مدينة أتلانتا في واحد من أكثر الأحداث السياسية غير العادية لهذا العام، في مناظرة تجمع اثنين من المرشحين الرئاسيين الذين لم يرشحهما حزبهما بعد. لماذا التقيا في وقت مبكر جدا من الحملة؟ هل كانت هناك أي مفاجآت؟ وما هي المواضيع التي سيطرت على المناظرة؟ من كان أداؤه أفضل من المتوقع؟ ومن ارتكب أخطاء في هذه المناظرة؟ لمناقشة نتائج المناظرة الأولى لحملة الرئاسية أكثر غرابة في التاريخ، يسعدني أن أرحب بنخبة من الخبراء السياسيين المتميزين بيل كريستال، إلين غودفري وأرني ساغز. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. We have just witnessed one of the most remarkable events in American politics, the earliest presidential debate between candidates that have not yet even been formally nominated by their parties. But this is not your usual election. This is an election between, at least we think, between the current president and the immediate past president. And they met in the city of Atlanta for a 90-minute face-off to discuss what happened and what the implications are for our November vote. I'm delighted to welcome Ernie Suggs, Elaine Godfrey, and Bill Kristol. Thank you all very much for joining me today. So just at the outset, without getting into too many specifics, general impression, was that a clarifying moment in Atlanta or just a mess that left our nation and the world more unsure about the future? Ernie, you're in Atlanta.
I think it was a mixture of both. I think it was a clarifying message because I think that President Biden had an agenda, or he had a goal that he had to meet, and he clearly did not meet that goal. And that was to prove to the American people that he was not too old. And unfortunately, I think he proved that he might be too old. And so I think that I think he kind of clarified what a lot of people were thinking and what a lot of people were assuming, and he put it all out in front of 90 million people, in front of a crowd of people who wanted to see what's going to happen in November.
All right, Elaine, what's your general impression?
I think that's right. I mean, it definitely clarified something, which is, wow, maybe what Republicans have been saying this whole time is right, which is Biden is incoherent, perhaps too old to be making decisions at this level. I mean, it was strange without getting too much into it. I mean, we saw Biden at the State of the Union, and I think that it was a very different version of Biden, different kind of speech, different kind of remarks, of course. But it was very clarifying. I think very frightening, maybe is the word, for a lot of Democratic donors, a lot of people in the base. We'll see if swing voters feel that way. It's early, but we'll see.
So, Bill, the story so far is Biden. Is that the story?
I think it is. And it's because it wasn't a normal debate where one candidate does a little better than you expected, another does a little worse. Maybe it moves a point in the polls. There's a lot of us, people like us, talking about it. And this answer was kind of off on abortion, or this answer wasn't as strong as it could have been on foreign policy. I mean, this was a different situation because people saw Joe Biden for a sustained period of time. I think it's a legitimate question. I say this is someone who's, of course, who voted for him in 2020 and intends to vote against Trump again in 2024. You saw him and you really thought, is he up to being president for the next 4 years? That's a different kind of judgment than, gee, their messaging isn't so great on a particular issue.
So let's dig into what happened a little bit more in depth. Joe Biden certainly gathered some steam in the middle of the event, but this was probably the worst first 10 minutes and the lamest finish of any presidential debate in history. Elaine, was this bad preparation? Was this just the wrong approach? What happened?
So, I was sort of watching, and in those first, 12 minutes or whatever, thinking, did he practice too much for this and sort of, memorize all these facts? And now he's coming out and he's just sort of shouting out, he's rattling out numbers. I won't say shouting because he was basically whispering. I mean, he was sick, I guess, but, really struggling to make a complete sentence, at least in the beginning, and sort of throwing out numbers. I don't know. I think he took off a whole weekend to go to Camp David to prepare for this, to gaggle with his aides to get ready for this. And no, I mean, it had this sort of, I don't know. He seemed almost too prepared, I guess I would say. But, as it was going on, he did get, I guess, marginally better. He sort of improvised, it seemed like, some lines. And that's kind of where Biden has shown in the past is, improvising lines like, "You have the morals of an alley cat," sort of a weird, like, 1950s insult. But that is who Joe Biden is. So those were, I guess, better moments. But by then most Americans had switched their TV off probably. So yeah, it did get marginally better, but no, I don't know what happened.
Ernie, we have focused our first 6 minutes all about Joe Biden. Did Donald Trump actually answer a single question that was posed to him all night?
Well, that's the question. But yeah, I mean, when we came out of that debate, we saw a weakened Joe Biden, but we also saw Donald Trump on the other side, who spent the entire night either not asking questions or lying. So I think that, what the American voters are going to have to decide. I'm not sure how many people were swayed last night who were already in each of these camps, but I think what the American people and voters are going to have to decide is whether or not they want 4 years of Donald Trump and the threats on democracy and his obvious skirting of the truth and exaggerating his accomplishments, or Joe Biden, who's obviously, and I think it's sad for us to kind of say, and I think Bill, who's been around for longer than I have, we're seeing a president right now who is probably not up to where he needs to be to lead this country over the next 4 years. So we all have a very, very difficult decision to make in November as to where we're going to let this country go.
And Bill, your impression about the Trump performance?
I mean, one word on Biden first, just because I think it is the dominant story. And I think he has a decision to make over the next days and weeks about whether he does step aside. I know everyone thinks he won't, he can't, it never happened. But I don't know. This is such an unusual moment that I think serious people, I would say, will go to him and say he should do it. He can reject the advice, but I think he's really putting things at risk in a way that I think it's riskier now to stay with Biden than to go to an open convention. But that's my own view, and I don't think that's Biden's view, and it's probably not the White House's view. So we'll see. But I think it kind of will be a lot of Americans' view, and a lot of Democrats' view, and a lot of swing voters' view, in my opinion. So, and it's doable. It's 4 months to Election Day. Most countries in the world have their entire election campaigns in 4 months. They nominate someone, they have a vote, they have a runoff. The idea that, like, oh my God, this is just, we're fated, it's inscribed somewhere in the heavens that we can't do, no one could change anything, is, I think, a little weird. I mean, on Trump, he was Trump, and I'm not a fan of Trump, so he lied a lot, and he demagogued, and he exaggerated. He couldn't resist the boasting about himself. That was, I thought, the kind of stupidest parts of the Trump answers in a way. But he was reasonably disciplined. He did a pretty good job of not answering questions he didn't want to answer, and just went off on the issues he wanted to talk about, immigration or whatever. You know why that doesn't work sometimes in debates? Either the moderator calls the candidate on that, but that was not the attitude of these moderators. And I'm not necessarily being critical of them. That just was the stance they had decided to take, just to say your time's up, Mr. Trump, not to have any kind of fact checking or challenging, really, even of the candidates. So you have to be called by the moderators, or you can be called by the opposing candidate. That's kind of usually what happens in debates, right? We've seen a million of them, not just for president, but for city council or something. One person says X, the other person says, wait a second, X isn't what true. I mean, now, the debate was, in that respect, the Biden camp wanted those rules, I think, of no interruptions and camera mics off for the 2 minutes when the other guy's speaking. Actually, it helped Trump. Trump gets, and I thought it would ahead of time. This is one of the few things I've been right about, I think, in recent years. I mean, Trump, it's good for a demagogue to have 2 minutes where he can't be interrupted or confronted. It's good to have rules where he just gets to say whatever he wants. So he pivoted. Literally, there were questions, I think, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, or where he didn't even have one sentence that was answering the question. He just went off into something else. But, if no one's going to call you on it.
Trump seemed to have taken advantage of the rules that Joe Biden preferred for the setup of this debate. All right, let's take a look at a couple of the specific issues. Our show beams out to the Middle East, so let's take a moment to focus on foreign policy. The only real serious foreign policy exchange, to the extent that there was any, had to do with Ukraine, NATO. When you look at that exchange, Elaine, can you come away with any insight about where Donald Trump may actually implement a different approach toward Ukraine than the Biden administration?
Well, I have to be honest. I mean, I had a hard time following what Trump said too, just given how he would sort of say whatever he wanted. And like Bill said, I wasn't even sure what the question had been. So, I guess the thing I remember from that exchange was him saying that Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, is a heck of a salesman, and that he leaves with billions of dollars every time he comes here or something. And there was sort of a back and forth about that with Biden saying, well, no, we only give him weapons. We don't give him money. And I mean, I guess that was substantive in that, but we already knew that Trump sort of believes that, right? Like Trump is not as keen on helping Ukraine, as keen on providing those weapons, that money, whatever. So I guess that was the only thing that I really got out of that. There was another moment where they talked about Israel. And again, it was sort of hard to follow Trump's response and Biden's for different reasons, obviously. Biden's because it was just sort of mumbly and incoherent. Trump's because it was wacky. And Trump called Biden a Palestinian and not a good one, a very bad Palestinian. It was so strange. And the moderators, as Bill said, they took a stance of, we're not getting involved, but it could have been helpful to have them involved at certain points to sort of reel folks back in, because it was just such a strange conversation.
Actually, I was going to ask the panel about that line, because for our viewers, it's a fascinating line. Evidently, Donald Trump meant it as an insult of some fashion. Bill, do you understand what he was trying to say?
I think he sort of vaguely wanted to associate Biden with unpopular pro-Palestinian demonstrators and, some parts of the U.S. and on college campuses, I guess. Trump, you always have to, there's always something there. I mean, he's not, sort of underneath it. You just have to disentangle it. And he's talking in a certain code sometimes purposely, kind of dog whistle type code, and sometimes just because that's kind of the way he is. And he's used to speaking at rallies where people don't expect you to kind of closely be making a logical argument. I would say in general on foreign policy, though, so picking up one of the lines, he didn't go full America first. I don't think he mentioned America first, the term. It just is on abortion policy, to take an important domestic issue where he's vulnerable, I would say, where the country isn't quite where his party is at this point, as he's vulnerable on Ukraine, for example, where his party is split, and the country's closer to Biden, in my opinion. The polls show it. He didn't go full, abortion restriction either. So to the degree that he had a sort of plan, it was to take the edge off the issues on which he's unpopular or which he's nervous about public opinion, and to really just come back over and over to the issues where he thinks he wins, inflation and immigration. And in that respect, it was Trumpy, so it wasn't like the normal way a politician would do this in a debate, but it wasn't ridiculous, right? I mean, it's a sensible political strategy. And again, if people don't call you on it, you kind of get it. You didn't come out of that debate thinking, oh my God, Donald Trump is going to Biden tried to make this point, but not very well. Donald Trump is going to destroy NATO. He's going to destroy the post-Cold War order. We're going to have nuclear proliferation. Our allies all over the world are going to be in a panic. Biden did, and he knows that issue well, Biden. So he tried to make those points, but I don't think it kind of quite landed. Just as on abortion, he didn't come out thinking Trump is going to be a radical right-winger who's going to sign a national abortion ban. So I think from Trump's point of view, he managed on both foreign policy and on some domestic issues to seem more reasonable.
All right, when we come back after the break, Ernie, we're going to continue our discussion on the domestic side of the agenda of what happened at Atlanta debate between the current and the former presidents of the United States in just a moment. Again, our guests today include Bill Kristol. Bill is the editor-at-large of The Bulwark and an essential voice in the Republican Never Trump movement. One of Washington's leading traditional conservatives, he was the founder and editor-at-large of the influential Weekly Standard. Also with us is Elaine Godfrey. Elaine is a staff writer at The Atlantic, one of America's leading magazines of news and ideas. A native of Iowa, she has also written for Real Clear Politics and New York Magazine. And joining us from Atlanta is Ernie Suggs. Ernie has reported for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for more than 25 years. A native of Brooklyn, New York, he serves on the board of the Harvard Nieman Fellowship, and he recently completed a documentary film about hip-hop music in the American South that was titled The South Got Something to Say. All right, Ernie, let me begin with you. There was a fascinating and, in my view, a little bit odd exchange as the candidates vied for the votes of African-American voters who, in this cycle, evidently are more up for grabs than in recent cycles. I found it a bit odd talking about black jobs, black homes, these sorts of things. But tell me, how did you come away from that series of exchanges?
I think if you look at Black Twitter, which is kind of the Bible for Black America, we're all trying to figure out what black jobs are. So when he talked about black jobs, we kind of wondered what that is and where he is putting black voters, how he is seeing black voters. And, you know, he had an event here.
Who's the he?
Former President Trump. He had an event here in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago with Byron Donalds, or a couple of days ago with Byron Donalds, in which he called in and said he had the most popular mugshot of all time, as if to say that this mugshot helps him identify with black voters. So, black voters are up for grabs. You know, the margins in which Biden collected black voters in 2020 is getting, getting smaller. But the polls, Bill knows the polls better than I do. I don't know. I've been black all my life. I don't know one black person in my circles who's going to vote for Donald Trump. But, he's out there. He's got these surrogates out there. He's talking, and people are talking about, what Donald Trump can do for them. And, he's capitalizing on it.
Bill, I think the only other politician mentioned in the evening was Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, African-American senator. Is he now the leading vice presidential candidate for Donald Trump?
I'm personally dubious of that. I think he'll go with a boring, white male governor like Doug Burgum, or maybe a senator like Bill Hagerty, or even Glenn Youngkin, the governor here in Virginia where I live. I mean, I think, anyway, that's sort of a political calculation on Trump's part. But he clearly likes Scott, and he's using Scott. If you want to be nasty, you can say he's using him as I don't know what exactly. He's using him as a way to appeal to black voters. There's no question about that. He virtually said that himself. How did Scott come up? It wasn't like Tim Scott's just a senator I like. It was in the context of having this discussion about, as Ernie says, black jobs. I'm going to now mention Tim Scott. Again, it's Trump, it's crude, it's people like me don't like that kind of thing, but I don't know, is it totally ineffective that he mentioned someone who is a prominent African-American senator, and maybe it does, has a certain resonance. It shows that it's on his mind, at least, right? You can't say that Trump is totally doesn't care at all about black voters.
Elaine, one issue that came up in only one or perhaps two exchanges is the fact that Donald Trump is a convicted felon. It was a line that President Biden used against Trump, and Trump immediately shot back with a knock on President Biden's son, Hunter, who himself is a convicted felon. But it was not a continuous theme throughout the evening. How did you find, this story, which hangs over the election, one would think, never before in American history? How did you find this story being told during the debate?
I think President Biden missed a lot of moments here. I mean, I think that he has a few strong issues, or at least a few issues that the campaign thinks are strong. And he only brought up the fact of Trump's being a felon a single time, and Trump had a retort for that. And then that was that. It was just pretty shocking. I mean, I feel like if I'm President Biden, I'm bringing that up a lot, right? Well, look, he's a convicted felon. You're voting for this? Just like I think Trump missed some opportunities to say, you're voting for this? Look at this old man. You know, I think that they both sort of missed their biggest issue here. I also think, I don't know if we'll talk about abortion, but like that to me was another big issue for Biden, and he flubbed it every time completely. You know, all he had to do was have a strong message about abortion, and every time it was incoherent. Once he brought up abortion and then somehow changed the subject on his own to illegal immigration, which was such a win for Trump. And it was just like, you know, how disappointing for Democrats who this is their number one issue. And this man is you know, this performance is the defense they get on this issue that they care about. So I think that Democrats were, you know, who were watching, which who knows how many were watching, and also how many persuadable voters were watching. I'm sure it was disappointing for them to hear nothing about the felonies, really, and nothing about abortion that was effective or powerful at all.
All right, so regrettably, we could go on for almost the 90 minutes of the debate, but I want to get now to the core political question. Ernie, in the inner Biden circle, what is going on today?
Well, they're panicking. I mean, I think that, you know, from the moment that he walked out on stage, you know, we knew that this was going to be a long night for President Biden. And I think that after the event, after the 90 minutes, his staff and the Democratic Party and everybody involved, and hopefully President Biden understands that it was a long night. So I think that they're spending a lot of time right now regrouping, understanding where they're going to go, trying to decide whether or not, you know, they want to continue supporting President Biden. I think President Biden is very stubborn. He's not going anywhere. He's had a tough, you know, his personal narrative is how he's kind of gotten up from falls all of his life. And I think he sees this as another fall, and I don't think he's going to step down. I think it's going to take a tremendous effort and tremendous something to get him to step aside. But I think that right now the party is kind of in free fall right now.
And Elaine, on the other side of the aisle, in the inner Trump circle, one would imagine they want Biden to stay in the race. Is there anything that they can do to make it more likely that he stays in the race?
I mean, they've been attacking Kamala Harris for a very long time, who's sort of the natural replacement if there would be a candidate swap. Attacking Gretchen Whitmer. I've seen from my Republican
the governor
sources,
of the state of Michigan.
Yes, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who I think is seen as an up-and-coming presidential contender here. I've already seen people talking about her record, people posting about, well, she can't be the replacement because here are all the horrible things she's done. You know, sort of, it's sort of beginning. But yeah, again, I think it's very unlikely that Biden gives in here.
All right. So just to close, yes or no, is Joe Biden the Democratic Party's candidate on the ballot in November? Ernie?
Yes.
And Bill?
No.
No. Elaine?
Yes, I think so.
All right. So I got 2 yeses and a no. That's terrific. I want to thank you all very much for this clarifying discussion about a clarifying event in Atlanta, the presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Thank you, Elaine Godfrey, Ernie Suggs, and Bill Kristol for joining me today on داخل واشنطن. وصلنا إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي أسئلة أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، وخاصة حول تأثير مناظرة أتلانتا على حملتنا الانتخابية الرئاسية، تواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاج Inside Washington أو مباشرة @RobSatloff. نلتقي في الأسبوع المقبل، وحتى ذلك الحين شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.